All right. Well, for me, it is good morning. You may not be on over by Ohio in the United States, so it is just 8 a.m. my time or so, 8:15. So good morning to you all, and I am ecstatic to be here this morning. So today we are going to be going over the concept and idea of Microsoft Fabric design patterns. But more importantly, it's also about understanding and aligning those patterns with the business to ensure proper success when you go to implement Microsoft Fabric. My name is Matthew Edington. I am a data engineering architect and MSDA. I also have my Fabric certification as of May, so I absolutely love Fabric and really got into it after the last pass data summit last year. A little bit about myself. I'm a lifelong martial artist. I have trained for 32 years or so. So I take the approach with IT from that concept of always being prepared, um, always looking for the next thing, and always making sure that your core skills are your foundations. And some of the things that I look for is just being prepared. And if you make a mistake or you need to try again, you do the old saying that I learned from my martial arts instructor for years: seven times down, eight times up. Basically, meaning that there's always another try. You never stop trying. So, without further ado, let's get into the main aspect that we're focusing on. But I have a couple of questions for you before we get started. So, this session is really going to be focused on, are you focused on learning what Fabric is? But more importantly, are you really wanting to understand the architecture of installing Fabric? When I first learned about Fabric, I always loved the idea of everything in one place. All of the sessions, and there's many awesome sessions that I saw at PASS last year, talked about all the cool little things you can do with Fabric, all of the advanced data science, all of the ETL processes, all of the mirroring of databasing that was coming and everything. But then I got back to my company and started showing them this stuff and showing how this could work for us. And then the questions start coming in. All right, that's cool. How do you use it? So one of the things is for you, are you excited about Fabric, but do you have any idea how it actually is implemented in your company, in your organization, when those big questions start coming? Are you confused about how Fabric can integrate with existing systems? How does Fabric take over, or does it not take over and just become an edge piece? How does it integrate? And so that's one of these sessions are. Is there a learning curve that you're kind of worried about? I loved the last session. She talked about you don't have to know everything about Fabric to get started. Just kind of move in. And that's really true here. Don't be so scared. And I promise you, I'm going to get you there. This was me 6 months ago trying to implement Fabric for the company that I work for. And it was kind of a nightmare and kind of scary. So I hope through this experience, I can show you how this isn't so scary and give you ideas how to actually implement this in your companies. So let's go through the agenda real quick. The way I like to present things is not just the technical, but let's think about the abstract business case. So we're going to have an actual business case. Architects are not just technical implement people. We have to think about the business first, because if the business has not seen the value of what you're wanting to do, it doesn't matter. But we do have to understand the patterns. We're going to design a solution front and back together. We're going to walk through this. And then, of course, we're going to finish the story and see how it affects our business users. So I want to take you and have you think about this presentation through my eyes as a person of this fictitious company. So before we get into the company, I want you to think about, where do you fit in this company? I don't know, how does this company work? So let's introduce our company. My wife and I were sitting binge watching shows like we always do, when I'm not out there training or she's not training or whatnot. And we came across this really cool show that I don't know you've ever heard of, and it was called Ted Lasso. And they had a scene multiple times through where they had the Diamond Dogs come together and talk, and they'd woof and howl and stuff. And my wife and I love animals. So the idea of making a company around their pieces, it just lit a fire underneath me. And I really came in here, and this is what we're going to be working on. So the company that we represent is Diamond Dogs Inc. Okay, so Diamond Dogs is a collaborative company, and they're more of a consulting firm. So they are designed around the idea of going into companies and making sure that they can eliminate roadblocks. They can bring and foster collaborations within the companies. They can help businesses grow. They can resolve conflicts, but they do it not through money. They don't do it through, hey, you need to make sure you pay me. They do it through integrity. So we're going to come in through here and really think about the idea of being proper and making sure your business first and the integrity of what you're doing is not just solve the problem quickly, but solve the problem correctly. Now, with any business, we have team members. So I want to introduce you, and please take into consideration Diamond Dogs Inc. to our wonderful team members. First of all, we have Brutus. Brutus is the Chief Technology Officer here at Diamond Dogs Inc. He is absolutely keen and focused and driven and always wants to make sure that our technology is cutting edge. Always wants to know that this process is focused, it's streamlined, it's efficient. It has to be. But it has to also serve the business and has to be a competitive edge and ready to go. So think about this individual as a just wonderful dog. Now, you'll notice I don't use humans. I love animals and I love dogs. The next dog that we're going to talk about is the solution architect, and has a special place in my heart because this is my pup, Raja. So Raja is our solution architect. This individual is really focused on making sure that it is a versatile platform that we implement for the business. Okay, now think about Fabric. Fabric can be implemented or could be very versatile in how it's used. Look at all the different ways you use it with Power BI or with the data science or with the ETLs or data warehouse, data lake solutions. There's tons of ways that you can cut and slice this. So the solution architect really has to make sure they understand how this all works. They're looking for very seamless integrations with current systems that their customers currently use. The next individual is the person that's going to be out in the field. They're the representatives of the sales. So we have Ralph. Now, clearly, I like boxers because Ralph is another salesperson. If you've ever had a boxer at home, think of a boxer that is just hyped up. I mean, this person has to be engaging, and every boxer I've ever met is just wow. So this individual is really focused on making sure that when they're with clients, there's no wait time. There is no wait time. They want access to this data. They want to be able to make sure that when they're working with the clients, boom, they know what's going on quick, fast, and they can close those deals and get to the chew toy as fast as possible. And the final person that we're going to be seeing on our team is Penelope. Penelope is our data analyst. They're the person that works very closely with the sales team. They drive insights from data for us. They have a need for a platform that can handle as much data or as little data as possible without any effect to how this happens. And they really want to focus on real-time analytics. And I love a French Bulldog for an analyst because French Bulldogs explore the world with pinpoint accuracy. So this really, really works for our team. So welcome to the team at Diamond Dogs Inc. So before we move on, we know Fabric. We know the team. We have an idea of the team's main goals. We know the coolness about Fabric, but I've got a question for you. How do you solve it? We know Microsoft provides very awesome platform. We know that it addresses many unique areas. We know that it could really focus on that. So let's find out kind of what they're looking for. Ralph, he wants to use the real-time data and to eliminate silos, and he wants to make sure that he's up to date on all of his customers' information when he's making these sales pitches. Brutus, our CTO, he wants to make sure that we can scale for these customers. As customers grow, we need to make sure we don't need to go back to the drawing board and have to refigure things out. And we want to make sure that we can just say, oh, you need more? Boom. Or, hey, we need to add another X. Boom. It's right there. Penelope, being a friend of Ralph and focusing on those data points, wants to make sure that she can have as much analytics capacity and capabilities that can do anything with large data set, from data science to real-time analytics to fast insights to building Power BI dashboards. So she needs to be able to do all of that through Fabric. And of course, Raja, the solution architects, want to make sure that when new technology comes out, this can integrate quickly and can be flexible, similar to Brutus, and be able to have no, and I mean zero, disruptions with our customers so that we serve them well. All right. So we know how to solve. We know Fabric can solve this. I think through the last year, I've had so many emails talking about Fabric and how all of it can do this for the customer, how all of this can solve your woes and everything like that. But the question and the reason for this implementation or this presentation is, how do we implement it? There are ways that Microsoft has helped us with this. We need to understand implementation patterns. Implementation patterns, there's multiples that we can make and do, and they meet different business and technical needs. We need to make sure that we understand each of these. We need to understand the business so that we can apply the proper pattern to their requirements and goals. We need to, again, make sure we understand the business and identify those pain points that each business has. Every business is not perfect. I don't think any of us will ever say that the business we work for is perfect, but we want to make sure we identify the pattern that best suits the needs of the business that we represent. So our objective, should you see fit, is to choose the best solution for Diamond Dogs Inc. So we understand that, and now we need to make sure that we have good understanding of the patterns that Microsoft has given us for how we can utilize Fabric in different environments and for different use cases. But before we get to those patterns, what are patterns? What are implementation patterns? Does it matter? Should you just use the product, hope it works, figure it out along the way, and just change as needed? So, not Microsoft, but any implementation pattern, and this is not unique to Fabric. If you've been an architect for a while, or if you have read architecture books, you understand that everything that I'm talking about here is not new. It is, how do you apply these concepts to the new technology of Microsoft Fabric? Make sure you understand that, because we're not redefining anything. We're not recreating anything. We're not making something completely new. We're applying good concepts that architects have been doing for a while within a technology framework that works to make sure our companies can do better work faster and be more focused. So, what are implementation patterns? Patterns are proven strategies. They are ways of doing work over and over that not only did I come up with, or you came up with, or the person down the road came up with, but a community of practice has come up with over and over and has found that these ways of doing business work well. Okay? They provide consistency and outcomes. So when you're looking at these patterns, thinking about making sure that you do these things so that every outcome that happens from your decision is known, or at least a well awareness. And then you can apply this strategy to, if you're a consulting company, the next business that you work for. This makes your turnaround time better. It allows for streamlined decision making. It means that instead of having to sit and read every book and know every little thing that ever happened, you have, again, that community of practice that has done these type of deployments before, and they have kind of a, if you will, a log of how this has happened before. They give you these ideas that you know, okay, I need to be prepared for this. I need to be prepared for that because company X has done this in the past and they fell into these pitfalls. I want to make sure I understand those well. And they make things scalable, and they make it so that the complexity is more controllable and more understood by those implementing it. I think as a previous engineer, one of the things that I always was scared of was learning something new, which was cool, but then implementing it and not knowing everything about it and really making something not work in the most efficient way, and we had to scrap the whole stuff. That was the whole thing that I was always scared about, making sure that this was happening. And I never wanted to implement what's called anti-patterns, so that it's a one-off. And then that one-off becomes a maintenance nightmare. By using implementation patterns, you now are not making what's called an anti-pattern, and you are implementing something that can be very useful to your company and can scale. And again, as companies grow, scalability is one of the things we want to make sure we give them. So some of the benefits, again, ensure your scalability and efficiency. Key thing here. So we talked about all the things I talked about not wanting to make anti-patterns, but what is one of the things that we see on the news, whether you are in the United States or in the EU or China or Japan, we always hear about the idea of risk of data, risk of your data being stolen, risk of denial of service attacks. I remember way back when doing my A+ certifications over here that they were big, especially for the network stuff. Hey, make sure you don't get hit by denial of service attacks. So these are things that when you use patterns, you can make sure that you're doing things in a set way that improves all of these risks and make sure that you're not going to be hit with them. It improves governance. You can provide a clear roadmap for deployment. You can minimize confusion for your company and your partners. Now, if you choose not to use a pattern, you have to make sure that you understand that you have a potential for the deployment that you've put out there to have bottlenecks, to have scalability issues. It may work for where you're at now, but it will not or could not work for what you need to do 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now. And what do you do then? You spend more money developing a process for making sure this works again. Just like we talked, you have an increased risk for security gaps. You have an increased risk to have these vulnerabilities be exposed and hit. You want to make sure those are not happening, but that's your choice. Higher costs are one of the things that really comes into my mind for a risk of ignoring patterns. Like I just talked a few minutes ago, it will cost you more in the long run to not plan ahead and not be aware of how you're going to grow, because once you hit that bottleneck where you've exceeded the capacity, you have to replan and redevelop. So by using proper patterns and thinking the whole thing through, you can eliminate that possible risk. So let's get into the actual patterns that Microsoft has given us for Microsoft Fabric. So the first pattern is going to be your simple deployment monolithic method. So this pattern is talking about a single tenant. So the tenant would be just your company, okay? A single Fabric capacity. So if you know Microsoft Fabric, you understand capacity controls your computational units, and it has a single workspace. meaning that the only thing that happens in there is everyone connects to this single workspace. So all of your resources are pooled. All of your resources are shared. Every user that connects to Microsoft Fabric to use it, whether it be for reports, which Power BI, for doing work in a data warehouse, for ETL work, for data science work, everybody connects to this single workspace. All computational units are shared. It is ideal for small organizations, development projects, things that you want to do and see, okay, can I do this? Or maybe, like I said, a small org, you're super tiny. You have a team of 4 or 5, that's all it's ever going to be. And you don't plan to expand. You just need something to work for right here. That's where this works. It is not very scalable. You will not be able to grow if you do it in this fashion and going to stick to this fashion. You have a couple of reasons that you can use it. We talked about a small development project. We call them POCs over here. Discovery projects are really great for monolithic. And organizations that understand that we're going to share computational units, and that's okay. That is what monolithic is very useful for. Pattern 2, okay? Pattern 2 is called multiple workspaces backed by a single capacity. You have a decentralized workspace. It is a common resource pool. You have the ability to control access from a single management location. So instead of having multiple places where you can manage, you have a single location, and it is best used for medium-sized organizations that need flexibility. So in the screenshot here, you can see that you again have your Fabric tenant, so the company. You have a capacity that is going to be able to control your computational units, but now you have the concept of multiple workspaces. This allows you to make sure you have a couple of different people in one workspace, a couple of different people in other workspace. It's good for decentralized access to data. It's good for, hey, maybe you have all of your processing in one workspace and then you're reporting off another, or you have teams in different areas. So that's what it's best for. You have good reasons used. So we talk about medallion architecture. So medallion architecture is the idea that you have raw data coming in, so your bronze layer. Then you do some changes and clean the data up, and you have your silver layer. And then you have your gold standard layer, standing on top of the podium. We just got done with the Olympics this year, and they're the first place. They're the gold standard. They are what you want to use to report off of. And so that's the idea of medallion architecture. And with the last screenshot I showed you, you could have a workspace per. Now, one of the things that has to come in here, again, you have one capacity, so you do have to accept the idea that your organization shares computational units when it comes to Microsoft Fabric running workloads. So as long as your company is okay with that, there's medium size, and it's good. Or the project that you're working on requires a hub and spoke architecture. You could have a single hub workspace where all of the other workspaces are basically going to that hub and grabbing data or having access to stuff. Or maybe you have a workspace that's focused just on Power BI. You have a workspace that's just focused on the data science, and everything goes to the centralized area for this data. So that's another reason you could use this. Pattern 3, multiple workspaces backed by separate Microsoft Fabric capacities. So each workspace at this point has its own capacity, and it scales across regions. It has tons of flexibility for the ability to add more computational units if you like. It is an independent workspace for each team or unit, depending on how you guys want to do your separation of work. It allows you to make sure that you can scale beyond any limit that you would need, depending on the work that is being done by those units. It is an exceptionally flexible structure. You can have as many capacities as you like with workspaces inside of those capacities, and you can exceed this idea of a single workspace. And it allows you a great amount of performance and allows you to have dedicated capacities that are really focused on specific units of work. So when you look at this screenshot here, you can see the idea again of our fabric tenant. So we have our workspace here, or our team underneath here. Then you have each capacity, A, B. So each capacity could be flexible. A could have more DTUs, so it'd be your F scale. So you could have like an F64, an F32 on there. And maybe B is just your POC. So you're kind of looking at this as I need to do something or need to try a new aspect of fabric. Maybe something is just come up and it is now, instead of it's in public preview. All right, let's spin up a capacity that's small. We can focus on this new public preview item and we can test things out, all the while not affecting our primary workloads of our company in capacity A. Now, where that differs from pattern 2 is if you wanted to do the same thing, you'd have to do that per workspace, but all of that testing and everything like that would be utilized in the same capacity. Thus, the computational units are being used and potentially affecting our production environments. And so, again, this is an exceptionally flexible process. You have a lot of options when it comes to how you deploy this pattern. You can really prioritize your environment. You can really have as many capacities as you want with the different levels of scale and focus in on workloads based upon the needs of the requester, the business that you're representing, or your own company. And maybe, just maybe, you wanted to start to develop the idea of a data mesh where things are centralized but decentralized, or a data fabric framework, and that's something that your company is really getting into, and this is a good way that that can be implemented. So the fourth and final pattern that Microsoft has released or has information on for Microsoft Fabric is the idea of multiple fabric tenants. So this is a way of utilizing fabric that is potentially segregated. Okay, so think about a very highly governed tenant. So you have literally two individual companies running fabric. There's full separation of management. Again, two companies. One company can run fabric in this tenant, another company runs fabric in this tenant, and there can be complete separation of these processes, controls, management, whatever. Data sharing would require pipelines between the two tenants and, of course, network communication. And it is best for multi-tenant organizations. I struggled with this one because multi-tenant, well, I just said multiple fabric tenants, so I kind of just repeated myself. But if you see in this screenshot that is going to come up here in just a second, think about a organization that potentially purchased another. So you have the idea, well, we have one company that's already working here, we have one company working here, there's a merger. Well, we just need to make communication between the two. So for now, we're going to have everything living in these two tenants. Or potentially government entities would utilize this where they want to keep things exceptionally segregated from one another. And reasons to use, you have to. Now think about regulated resources, and they have to make sure that things are very explicitly segregated from one another. You have a subsidiary in your company where it requires that accounting is over here, but no one else is allowed to use accounting. But maybe there's a requirement that not only are not allowed to use it, they need to have their own specific segregated access completely away from one another. And this is a good use for this. And like I talked earlier, we have organization acquisitions. So now that we understand our patterns, we understand the business a little bit, we need to spend some time designing the solution. I love this image a little bit because designing the solution takes time. And my first dog when I was a young kid was a black lab like this. Her name was Shadow. And Shadow was a thinker. There was nothing this dog could not escape. I remember my family having to put in a 6 foot fence, then an 8 foot fence, then a 10 foot fence, and the dog still escaped, which to me brings in the idea of when you design a solution, you have to make sure you're thinking very, very analytically and thinking about how does each pattern and what are the pros and cons of each one. So, without further ado, let's start to design the solution together, will we? But first, why should our business partners care about design patterns? So I know that we kind of talked about earlier on why we care about design patterns as architects. Why would we use this to design anything? But what about our business partners? Why should they care about design pattern one versus design pattern two? Or why monolithic is a POC environment, but when we need to scale, we need to use pattern three, multiple capacity units with multiple workspaces? Business people don't generally care. We need to make sure that they understand the idea of scalability. We need to make sure they understand that while your growth pattern, your growth idea is more sales, well, to do more sales, we need to make sure that IT can grow with you because the company I'm working at right now has grown by leaps and bounds. And I'm not just talking, 2 or 3 people every year. I'm talking growing from 6 people to 500 or 600 people in this course of 2 or 3 years. So IT had to scale exceptionally fast. We need to make sure when we're working with our companies that they understand that scalability is hard. And if we decide around the right pattern, we can scale with them without slowdown. And that slowdown, like the company I'm working for has felt for the last year or so, can happen. And so we need to make sure that we understand these patterns well. We need to make sure that they understand that by taking a moment and thinking and really assessing each pattern, we can reduce the complexity of our design. We may know something really well, but then maybe little pieces off to the side that we see don't know quite so well. So we design what we know and don't design what we don't know, and it may cost us more money because we kind of have to S pattern around here and figure out what we're doing. So by using patterns properly, we save them money. And of course, the big thing for me that we always talk about is security. It needs to be front and center to our business partners that they understand that by using proper patterns, Microsoft Fabric patterns or any other pattern that you're working on for any other technical solution, it minimizes security risks. And security risks keep us in business if we mitigate them or put us out of business if we ignore them. So we want to make sure that they really understand why these matter to them because just like a curious dog that gets into places they don't need, I'm thinking of a thinking of the old Disney movie where Lady and the Tramp, there we go, where the tramp just goes wherever he wants and kind of gets in trouble. We want to make sure that we don't put ourselves out there. And we are designing these for their long-term success. IT kind of gets hidden. We want to make sure that they are the ones that's successful. So while we designed the solution, we talked earlier on, that was like a half hour ago. So we heard about the business. All right, they're cute, they're cuddly, they're wonderful. We scratch their head and love them. But what about their challenges? So let's go back to the business while we design this solution. So the challenges that the business have, let's go back to our sales representative, Ralph. Ralph requires real-time data for fast response while working with his business partners. He's right now struggling with siloed systems, so slow data responses. So when he's with a customer, he struggles with being able to give them information quickly, which makes his sales pitches seem choppy and makes it harder for him to be able to make these sales. Brutus, our CTO or CIO, whichever way we look at it, they want to make sure that when we're designing these processes, There is the ability to scale. And I know I've said that a lot, but it's such a key thing here that it scales without losing performance for the business. Again, think about why I organized them this way. Business first. Then the CTO always thinks about that as well. Always think about don't lose performance for the business, but be able to support them when they need to. Penelope, our cute little Frenchie, needs faster data processing, needs to make sure that they can do the insights, build the reports, design the systems around things for Ralph quickly, timely, and make sure that this is awesome. And of course, my favorite, Raja, needs flexibility for technical integrations, needs to make sure that what they design has the ability to be customized to the unique organization that they're representing at the time. Again, Diamond Dogs is a consulting firm, so they're not always going to have the same company. So they need to have Microsoft Fabric be flexible for whatever they're working. Okay? So while we understand our challenges, now we need to assess the business. Right now, we're working with Diamond Dogs. So assess the business, and we need to do a risk analysis. So number one, the first risk analysis is that the business needs real-time access to sales data. They need to be able to process large data sets for reporting. They need to scale. They need to have flexibility. They need to make sure that this is able to be changed at a whim without hurting the business and without affecting the business's performance. And of course, I think we'd be amiss if we didn't talk about security and compliance. And you'd notice something here. There wasn't a whole lot of security and compliance talked about in the previous slide by the business entities and units. I always think that security and compliance should always show up on a risk assessment and analysis because it's always in the back of our mind. I am always terrified. It's Halloween season over here in the United States, and my one friend likes the scary movie called The Terrifier, and it's that ugly, gross clown that smiles and looks just gnarly. But that's one of the big things that security and compliance is always sitting back in the back. If you ignore it and you forget about it, it's gonna come out and bite you. And you want to make sure that that's always put on your risk analysis, because if you forget it and you don't take it seriously, it will really will bite you. So let's look at our risk summary. So it took all this idea and we put it into a nice little chart here. So always do something like this where you can kind of look at the impact, you can kind of look at the likelihood, and you can kind of have an idea of a mitigation plan around all right, so we need to make sure we do different things. So for the real-time access, it's fairly high because the business really, really needs it. We want to build redundancy and optimize all of our data pipelines so that this access can happen. We want to make sure that our large data sets for reporting can have optimized queries. They can have parallel processing, if that's even a thing in Microsoft Fabric, which it is, and the monitor performance. We want to be scalable. We want to be flexible. We want to make sure that we're using services in this idea, cloud native services, that we can have the ability to change capacities as needed. I'm kind of alluding to some ideas, so I want you to put your thinking caps on. And of course, security and compliance. We want to make sure that we can have security audits. We want to make sure that we can have different ways of mitigating any compliance risks. So let's go through the patterns that we learned earlier and let's assign them to the business requests and do a pro and con analysis. So our first one, monolithic. That is the single fabric tenant, the single capacity, and the single workspace. There are some pros. I mean, with everything, there's pros, and I don't think we can think of anything doesn't have some sort of pro. So at first, for Brutus, our CTO, monolithic has a very simple design. It is easy to implement. It's easy to maintain. It is just there. You can turn it on and be like, yeah, go. Okay. Raja, solution architect, understands that Microsoft Fabric regardless of the pattern, technically integrates with current systems. You just have to work it a little bit. Ralph understands that Fabric natively allows for good, fast reporting. That's the design around Fabric, when not only the design, but one of the main designs that allows for good reporting with Power BI integration. And Penelope realizes that with Microsoft Fabric, she can finally do real-time data analysis. Regardless of the pattern chosen, that is one of the things. And she will have a single workspace to work for this analysis. So we went through some pros. Let's go through some cons. Our CTO, thinking about how they want this to work and how they want it to be flexible and make sure that its ability to work for our business, realizes that, well, this is one capacity, so everybody will share the CU. And so there could be potential, if there's a large workload going on, for slowness. Everyone uses that. So if we needed to do anything, the only way that they would have to mitigate the slowness is to just keep upping the CUs all the time, and then have to figure out a way to handle that. It's not as scalable. You only have a single workspace. Raja, the solution architect, and I'm sure my dog Raja right now that I'm talking about her is sitting outside my office door, keep putting her ears up like, why do you keep saying my name and not seeing me? So, but it's not scalable. Ralph, which should be our salesperson, realizes that since single U, CT or CU, if there's a high business process working at the same time he's going for his sales pitches, he might get wait times because there's only so much work that can happen all at once. And Penelope realizes that this potentially, though she has options to do real-time analysis, it may not be useful for production. She can do all of the tests she wants, but it's not useful for production. So we went through monolithic. Let's move on to pattern 2, multiple workspace, single capacity. So Brutus on the Pro realizes that because you have more workspaces, you have the availability of improved scalability. We can add more workspaces for individual users. We can add more workspaces, again, for medallion architecture. We could also, with Raja, we understand that there is a better security plane. So think about, again, those workspaces. Take out medallion architecture and put in the idea of each workspace per business unit. Only certain business units are allowed to use this workspace versus this workspace, and you can set those security rights up based upon those workspaces more easily than you can with monolithic, where you only have a single workspace, so everybody got to have access to it. Excuse me. Ralph at sales understands that he can have his own dedicated workspace to do his reporting, kind of piggybacking off what Raja's thinking. And he knows, oh, sweet, I have one place to go. It's mine. It's all mine. If you know anything about a boxer, that is always how they think. So that's really good for Ralph. And Penelope, again, being the little, hyper dog that she is, knows that, yes, I have real-time data analysis. Same thing as last time. A Frenchie, that is very Frenchy. Cons, though. Always look at the cons. So we're here, Brutus. While we have more workspaces, we are still sharing the computational units. This is a pitfall for monolithic. While it offers things that you can do with the workspaces, you still have the potential for computation unit throttling. So that's a con. Raja, the CUs aren't as scalable. So you can add as many workspaces as you want. You can take workspaces away. You can have security on these things, but the CUs are only scalable at the capacity level. So to add more, everybody gets more CUs. So if you have a high workload happening in your system and you auto scale, or you decide, oh, I got a phone call, tech picks up, I need to scale, we scale up. Well, everybody received that same thing, so it kind of gets split, whoever gets access to it. Ralph, again, he's like, cool, I got my own workspace. Darn it, I have the same issue. I'm waiting. So, Ralph is very pushy. That's definitely boxer. Very pushy that I want to make sure I don't have wait times. And Penelope understands that while they have this, there's only like a medium data governance when it comes to workspaces. It's not separated quite the way they want to do it. So let's move in to our third pattern. And I'm going to start speeding up a little bit here. So when it comes to our third pattern, Brutus understands that this has one of the highest scalability options here because now we have multiple computational units because of the multiple capacities. We can really figure things out. We could have all kinds of different options. Raja understands there's a ultra granular data plane for security. Not only can we secure at the workspace level, we can secure at the capacity level, we can be secure at the data level. This is awesome for Raja's ideas. Ralph, once again, just like the last one, gets their dedicated reporting space, but oh, by the way, it's always got power. And so he's super excited about that. And Penelope allows, again, real-time data analysis and high data governance. Cons. It is, now, while this is super cool and super awesome, there's always cons to everything. Multiple capacity, multiple workspace is a little more difficult to implement out the gate. You have to think through each capacity and how it works. It's slower to market. So that is something to take in consideration. Because of the complex design, you have to have better administration and they have to understand the granularities of the administration and how that affects each user. That is actually something that we are going through as a company and that I've really started researching on is I don't get to play with all the cool things in notebooks and Python like I want to. I have to understand how admin actually works, and admin data is dry. In sales, we need to make sure that we understand the sales team that, like Brutus, it may take longer for new features to get to them. They may hear about something that's super cool, but they can't get it because it takes longer to get to market. In Penelope, they have more data domains to manage because potentially you might have a capacity. Penelope may have access to all of these things because they're the data analyst, but they'll have more places that they have to go to do different things depending on the domain that they're servicing at that time. We cannot forget separate tenants. So a pro of separate tenants is you technically, per tenant, could utilize any of the three previous patterns, which is kind of cool. You could, here for Raja, you have exceptionally strict security and data segregation. Think about a dog with a bone. They are super excited about that bone. Then they see the next bone. Okay, so now we have two ideas here and two things to manage. So we'll get into that with cons. Ralph, they again have their dedicated work spaces. Now he gets two. Is two better? I don't know, maybe. Maybe three. And Penelope allows for real-time data analysis. Let's go to our cons. Brutus realizes that while this is really cool, we have more options, it is much more difficult to manage and is harder to communicate the design. Raja realizes that this is a more complex design. It takes an exceptional amount of administration. It's super granular. You have two full tenants to manage, potentially more, and it's very difficult. You have different domains for access per tenant, and Penelope has no centralized data place to have all their data in one. One of the key things about Microsoft Fabric that I heard, I don't know, 50,000 times at the last Past Data Summit is all your data in one place, everywhere, with love. And that's what we want to make sure that we offer our business. So let's choose the right pattern based upon our understanding. So we have our monolithic, and those are some ideas beneath it that we understand. We have our multiple workspace, single capacity. We have multiple workspaces, separate capacities, and of course, we have our separate tenants. So let's star these out, okay? So monolithic, I'm giving it a 1 star out of 3 because it's not very flexible. It doesn't give us the options we want. Let's go over to pattern 4. It is, while it has the options for multiple things, this may be too much strict segregation, maybe too much to manage all at once. So now we have two really good options. Multi-workspace, single capacity gets a 2-star because while it offers the idea of multiple workspaces, you only have a single capacity unit to run this. And finally, I feel that for the solution that we are trying to solve, we are showing the best option of multiple workspaces and separate capacities. So while we chose that, I want to talk about some variants that come with this selection and how it can affect our business. So multiple workspaces, separate capacities, variant 1 is bifunctional unit. And I kind of alluded to this earlier, where you have a capacity per unit of function, like let's go sales, and then stream analytics, or accounting, or data reporting, or whatever. They can have a production CU and a dev C, or sorry, a production workspace and a development workspace in the CU. You have to scale those CUs properly to be able to handle development and production in the same area. So we start to fall a little bit into the issues with option 2, because while we have multiple capacities, we're technically utilizing them in this manner, like pattern 2, which is multiple workspaces backed by a single capacity, because we're putting prod, dev, UAT, or quality control all in one capacity. So another variant that I like better would be your multiple workspaces, separate capacities by development cycle. So this allows for sales and your stream analytics to have production inside of a production CU, and you can have development inside a development CU. So you have more control over the capacity units per need. Development may not need as large. You might be able to get away with an F2 or F8, one of the lower capacities that's needed there, and you just need developers in there. While production could get the full bang of an F64 and have all those awesome options that are available to it, and you can have it separated by that. So we have done a lot, and I've talked about a lot, not just the technical aspects, but how we can really focus on the business. So with my last 10 minutes, I want to really finish this story. I want to take everything that we learned and make it come full circle. In martial arts, we talk about, you'd see a lot of old stories and everything, and the original black belt certificates had nothing but a circle, and it was a full circle where the master becomes the student again. So we want to finish this story. So we are going to talk about a solution for our stakeholders where they chose the wrong pattern. They wanted to get this out fast. We just wanted them to be done. They said, hey, give me this, so we gave it to them. We didn't consider the business requirements. We didn't do a proper risk assessment. We rushed. So we gave them monolithic. Couple of issues with monolithic, like we talked about. While they're using it, they're super happy at first. They're, yay, we're doing all these things. And like, oh, by the way, we need to do this. Oh, we chose monolithic. It doesn't scale with what you want. We're going to have to redesign this a little bit and go to a different idea. So that's what Brutus has an issue with. Raja talks to them. They're like, hey, you only have a single workspace right now. I can't add this for you without creating a new workspace where you're going to have to add more work or take some of the work that you had here over there. So it's going to take a little bit to implement this for you. So they have to wait. Ralph in sales says, oh, I have to wait all the time for access to my reports. Why is this happening? This is what you were supposed to solve for. And Penelope, going back on the real-time data analysis like a friend she does, just sitting here like, I can't wait anymore. So these are some of the pitfalls that you are, or could see, I should say, if you rush the process. And like every dog, when they're caught red-handed trying to eat my bacon on Sunday morning, they hide their eyes. And I hope my dog heard that. Let's review now. If you take the proper time and choose a good pattern at the start and make sure that you're ready for these potential options, the solution integrates well. So Brutus is really excited, really happy, integrates well, it's streamlined. Raja realizes this is secure, but it's also flexible. It allows our companies that we're representing to do what they need to do, to grow how they need to grow, and be ready for them when they're ready to grow. Ralph finally has his sales reports and he's super happy because they became available to them instantly. And Penelope, once again, is happy with the real-time data analysis. They're super happy. I just love these guys. So let's recap with my final 7 minutes of this presentation. Design patterns. I kind of like this little trail off. Design patterns are not shortcuts. They're not designed to give you all the answers right now without thinking. They require you to have proper planning, to sit down, have conversations, not only at the technical level, but at the business level. And you must keep and have buy-in from key stakeholders. It can't just be a cool idea that technology thinks. We got to have our business partners agree. And that's why I spent so much time on why should the business understand these patterns too? Why should you communicate this with our business so that they understand that? This idea of patterns is not a sexy, cool idea when it comes to technology. It's not the cool thing that Ann, the last presenter, showed with all the cool things that are available in Microsoft Fabric. It's not all of the fun snacks that we get from our wonderful people across the pond, if you will, and that I love going, and I'm so excited that passes in a couple weeks because I want snacks and everything. But we need to make sure that we understand that they understand it, they accept what we're planning for them. But design patterns are implementation guidelines. And I really highlighted standardized because we want them to be standardized. More than one company should be able to use them. They improve the outcomes and efficiencies of all of your companies. They generally accelerate your time to market. They make it easier for your companies to get things up, get things moving without having to have meeting on what we're doing, then another meeting on what we're doing, part 2 and part 3 and part 4. And finally, we want to make sure that design patterns ensure our stakeholder satisfaction. By using them, you will find that while the company may not understand 100% right out the gate, by using them over and over for not only Microsoft Fabric, but for other technical processes that you're working on, you will find that your stakeholders will become more satisfied because they know what's going on and they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I have been exceptionally happy to be here as a martial arts artist of 32 years and a teacher of the last 20. I love teaching, I love sharing, and it's been one of my lifelong goals to present to other people some of the ideas that I have. So I really thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to do this. Before I open up for questions, I want to thank Andy and his wonderful wife for allowing me to use them as my mentors and help me listen and give me some feedback. So thank you again.